Unsolved.
The Zodiac Killer Case. Zodiac's attack plan at Presidio Heights. The Zodiac Killer planned out these attacks, especially looking at the Lake Berryessa attack. He made that costume. He cut that clothesline into strips so he could tie up his victims. And he had the little story to tell them why he was tying them up. And I don't think this attack was much different. He planned out several things in advance. So that's what this video is about. So the first thing is he planned to take a taxi to Washington and Maple. And then when he got there, he planned to shoot the taxi driver with a 9mm gun, a different gun than he had used in any other crime. Then he planned to cut off a piece of the cabbie's shirt because he brought some kind of knife to accomplish this. Then he planned to take the driver's wallet and keys. And I put a question mark there because I'm not 100% sure of that, but that's what he did. Then he wiped off the taxi inside and out, and he brought a rag to do that, or a handkerchief. Then he walked north to his car, or a park, or to his house, or someplace that he was staying. Now this is confusing to me because the car is what makes the most sense. But he didn't get in his car and drive away, and it seems like he had time to do that before they came out and started searching. And last, the Zodiac planned to mail this letter after he committed this crime, including a piece of the victim's shirt. Now around 9:30 that night, Paul Stine was over in this area in San Francisco when his dispatcher received a phone call at 500 9th Avenue, Apartment 1, for a taxi ride. And the dispatcher gave him a time of 9:45 p.m. And Paul Stine went to go there, but the Zodiac Killer hailed the taxi. And so Paul Stine decided to give him a ride to Presidio Heights, most likely because it was in the same direction that he was going already. And here in this map, you can see the planned route to 9th Avenue, and you can see the actual route that Paul Stine took to the Presidio Heights neighborhood. Now at 9:45, Paul Stine arrived at Washington and Maple. And I know other people give a time of 9:55, but it was closer to 9:45. And then for some reason, Paul Stine drove forward one more block to Washington and Cherry. And the Zodiac Killer shot and killed him. And then the Zodiac Killer took a lot of time doing several things. For one, cutting his shirt, and two, removing his wallet and getting the keys, and three, wiping the taxi down inside and out with a rag. And then he headed north on Cherry Street. Now immediately after the Zodiac Killer shot Paul Stine, across the street, teenager Rebecca Robbins, 14 years old, started watching the Zodiac Killer. And then she went and got her brother, Sidney Lindsay Robbins, 16, and her younger brother, Trevor Robbins. And they watched the Zodiac Killer wipe down the taxi cab and walk away from the crime. And then Lindsay That's his middle name, which he went by. He went outside and walked to the crime scene as the Zodiac killer walked north on Cherry Street. And then shortly thereafter, the police pulled up because Rebecca had called them. Now, this is an article that came out before they knew the Zodiac committed the crime. And you can see it describes the man as middle-aged, blonde, and jumping over a wall around the military reservation. Now back to this graphic right here. The Zodiac planned to kill the cabbie at Washington and Maple. And then he was going to head north, the green arrow, towards the park. But for some reason, he decided to have the cabbie move 1 block forward. And so the crime occurred on Washington and Cherry. And so when the Zodiac left, he went north up Cherry and then made a right and took Jackson Street. And then when he got to Jackson and Maple, the police stopped and asked him a question. And then they went on, and then supposedly the Zodiac killer headed north on Maple towards the Presidio. But what doesn't make sense to me is, if the Zodiac's car was parked anywhere in that area, why didn't he just get in his car and drive away? It seems like that would have been the smart thing to do. And even if he was parked pretty far away, he still would have had time to get to his car and then leave. But he didn't do that according to his letter. He said that he hid in the park. So what I'm thinking is, maybe he lied about hiding out in the park. He didn't hide out in the park. He actually lived over in that area somewhere in one of those houses. And he was able to state things that occurred because he was looking out his window when they were searching for him that night. So he knew about the police motorcycles, the fire trucks, the search dog, and the loud noises. Not because he was in the park, but because he was in his house or someplace that he was staying at. Now, wouldn't it be interesting to know who lived in those houses on Maple and Jackson Street in that area? Well, unfortunately, we only can look at the census of 1950. We can't look at 1960 or 1970. But in 1950, 34 Maple, that's the house on the corner, Mr. Hopkins lived there. And he would be too old to be the Zodiac killer, and he didn't have a son. And another thing that comes up is reality. And what I noticed at looking at the census, there were several servants that worked in these houses and lived in these houses. You had a chauffeur, a maid, a cook. So maybe the Zodiac killer was employed by one of these rich folks that lived in this area. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and on the next Zodiac killer case, we'll look at a few people that lived in that area, because I do have access through the internet for the phone books, so I'll be able to do a little research. So I'll see you the next time.